Okay, I want to start today by throwing a word at you. A word that usually smells like stale office coffee and sounds like the hum of a server room. Optimization?
Oh, yeah. The favorite buzzword of project managers everywhere.
Exactly. When you hear optimization, what do you see?
I see spreadsheets. I see, supply chains being tightened. I see a coder trying to shave 3 milliseconds off a database query. It's cold. It's mechanical.
It feels very industrial, right? But today, we're going to take that concept, that rigorous, analytical engineer's mindset, and we're going to drop it right into the middle of a garden center.
Which is usually the one place people go to escape that kind of thinking. You go to a garden to let things be messy and organic, not to optimize them.
Usually, yes, but not for the subject of today's deep dive.
Yeah.
We're looking at a truly fascinating source from a blog called qianmeng.org. The post is titled, Notes on Gardening, Part 790. Should we explore the Trailing Pegaga, Dichondra micrantha?
And just to orient everyone, this entry was published on Wednesday, January 28, 2026.
Now, before we even get into the dirt, I have to stop at the title. Part 790.
It just stops you in your tracks, doesn't it?
It's a staggering number.
Yeah.
I mean, if you told me you had 790 notes on anything, even your favorite TV show, I'd assume it was your life's work.
Right.
But this is just the gardening section. We aren't looking at a casual weekend hobbyist here. We're analyzing the work of someone who explicitly identifies as an old software plumber.
And that identity is so crucial. It's the lens through which we have to view everything in this deep dive. When he calls himself a plumber, he's not talking about sinks and toilets. In the tech world, a software plumber is someone who deals with the unglamorous structural side of code, connecting pipes, fixing leaks, managing data flow.
Infrastructure.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that he applies that exact same systems architecture thinking to leaves, roots, and potting soil.
He doesn't just plant a flower, he installs a module. So our mission today is twofold. First, we need to geek out on the specific botanical discovery he made, this Trailing Pegaga. But more importantly, we need to reverse engineer the mindset behind the discovery. How does a software engineer debug his garden? How does he manage version control for his own life?
It's essentially life as an operating system.
I love that. So let's boot up the source material. It starts, as all good engineering projects do, with a requirements document, or at least a plan.
Right. So Eng, the author, begins this post by referencing a previous state. He was in the middle of an evaluation process for a plant called Centella asiatica, which is commonly known as Pegaga.
And strictly based on the notes, he wasn't just browsing for something that looked nice next to the petunias. He had a very specific use case, didn't he?
He did. This is where the engineer shows up immediately. He notes that he was planning to utilize the Pegaga as a semi-aquatic plant for outdoor ponds.
Okay, let's unpack that. That is a functional requirement.
Precisely. He has a water feature. That's the hardware environment. And needs a biological component that is compatible with high moisture. That's the software requirement. He's looking for a solution to a problem. I need biomass that survives in water.
It's a very logical problem-solution loop. He's not looking for beauty yet. He's looking for compatibility.
So he initiates a field trip, as he calls it, to the garden center. Presumably, he's there to execute the code, buy the centella, put it in the pond, close the ticket.
But then we get a runtime error, or maybe a feature request. He gets distracted.
A new variable enters the equation. He stumbles upon a completely different variety, the Dichondra micrantha or the Trailing Pegaga.
And this is the moment where the software plumber reveals a different side of himself.
Yeah.
If he were purely a robot, he would have ignored it. It didn't meet the pond spec. It wasn't the semi-aquatic solution he came for. But he stops.
And the way he describes this new plant, it's actually quite moving. I found it so charming because it breaks that stereotype of the cold engineer.
He completely pivots from the semi-aquatic pond idea because he falls in love with the interface, the visual look of this new plant.
The visual description in the source is remarkably high resolution. He's not just saying it's green or it's small.
No, listen to this detail. He breaks down the differences. He notes that the leaves of the Dichondra are considerably smaller than the common Pegaga. But then he zooms in on the texture. He describes these petite leaves as having a beautiful silvery green sheen.
That word sheen matters. He's noticing the way light interacts with the object.
And he doesn't stop there. He uses a specific analogy. He says it has a soft, subtle luster, reminiscent of the surface of a pearl.
A curl. That is such a specific, delicate image. It's interesting to see that switch flip, isn't it? He walks in with a utilitarian mindset. I need a semi-aquatic unit. and he walks out captivated by the pearl-like sheen of a creeper.
It highlights a duality that I think is really important for us to grasp. We often stereotype the engineer mind as being purely binary. Does it work? Yes or no? Is it efficient? True or false? But Ang demonstrates that observation, true, deep, high-fidelity observation, is a core part of that mindset.
You can't optimize a system if you don't notice the details. If you can't see the sheen, you might miss a symptom of health or disease. In this case, the detail was aesthetic, but the muscle he's using, that hyper-awareness, is the same muscle he'd used to spot a memory leak in a line of code.
So he's captivated by the aesthetics. He's found his pearl. But he's still a plumber at heart. He doesn't just buy it and stick it in the ground randomly. He immediately starts processing the specs of this new hardware to figure out where it fits.
Exactly. He has to run a compatibility check. He notes the growth habit. The source describes it as trailing and creeping.
Which means it spreads out across the surface or hangs down if elevated.
Right. And this brings us back to that concept of optimization we started with. Because of this trailing habit, he identifies it as an ideal candidate for two specific deployment environments: ground cover or hanging pots.
It's an if-and statement. If trailing, then hang or spread. And he makes a definitive choice. He says, my preference leans towards the former, referring to the hanging pots, but I want to drill down into why. He says, I'm constantly looking for ways to optimize various gardening spaces through strategic pot placement.
That sentence is the key to the whole post. Optimize various gardening spaces.
It sounds like he's talking about disk defragmentation.
It really does. But think about what he's actually doing here. In computer science, we talk about space complexity.
Okay, break that down for us. What is space complexity?
In algorithms, space complexity is basically a measure of how much working memory, RAM an algorithm needs to run. If you write bad code, it eats up all your RAM, the computer slows down, and eventually the system crashes because there's no space left to think.
Okay, so map that to the garden.
The garden floor, the soil surface, is your RAM. It's your primary memory. It is a finite, scarce resource. You only have so many square feet of ground. If you plant everything in the ground, you run out of memory. You get a stack overflow, literally. You have no room to walk, no room for new plants.
So by choosing the hanging pots, he's essentially vertical scaling.
Precisely. He's moving his data, or in this case his plants, into the cloud. By hanging the Dichondra micrantha, he utilizes the z-axis. He frees up the ground level for other modules, maybe plants that require deep roots or heavy shade, while allowing the Trailing Pegaga to do what it does best.
To creep and trail without consuming that valuable floor space. It's so smart. It's efficient management of physical resources.
And notice how the engineering solution actually serves the artistic desire. We talked about the pearl-like sheen.
Right.
If he optimized purely for density and put it on the ground, you'd walk all over it. You wouldn't see the sheen.
You'd miss the data.
Exactly. By elevating it, by optimizing the placement, he actually highlights the feature that drew him in. The hanging pot is the best UI user interface for that specific plant.
That is a great point. The optimization serves the aesthetic. It's managing the garden as a system, not just a collection of pretty flowers. And I think that systems thinking is what makes this source so fascinating, because when we zoom out, we really need to zoom out here. We mentioned earlier that this was part 790 of his gardening notes.
Yes, which is impressive enough on its own.
But I went to the sidebar of the blog to see what else he was up to. I looked at the metadata surrounding this one post. And it is absolutely wild.
It's prolific. What did you find?
I looked at the archive link for the current month. Remember, the date of this post is January 28, 2026.
Correct. So we are 4 weeks into the year.
The archive link says Jan 2026, 84.
84.
84 posts in 28 days. That's an average of 3 posts every single day.
That is relentless. That's not just a hobby. It suggests a continuous stream of documentation.
Most people live their lives. And maybe once a month they reflect on it, or they post one highlighted photo to Instagram. Ang is living his life in real-time updates.
And it's not just gardening. I was scrolling through the project list in the sidebar, and it reads like the curriculum of a very confused but brilliant university.
Okay, confused isn't the right word. Polymathematical, maybe? He's a Renaissance man with a keyboard.
That's a better way to put it.
But look at the spread. We have the notes on gardening, obviously, but then right next to it we have notes on Haskell programming.
Which, for those who don't know, is a very dense functional programming language. It's purely mathematical. It's about as far from digging in the dirt as you can get.
Then we have notes on Elixir, Python, Rust, Go, AI. That's the software plumber side. But then look at the life skills, notes on fish keeping, and that's at part 182, by the way.
Part 182, that's a lot of water changes.
Notes on photography at part 226. Notes on dieting, specifically discussing things like late cha and parboiled rice. Notes on home improvement. Notes on guitar.
It's the commit log of a human life.
Okay, expand on that commit log idea for the listeners who aren't developers. What does that actually mean?
So in software development, you use a version control system, usually something called Git. Every time you make a change to the code, whether you fix a bug, add a button, or just clean up a typo, you save it. That save is called a commit. And crucially, you have to write a message explaining what you did. Fixed login bug, updated color scheme.
It creates a history.
Exactly. It creates a granular, step-by-step history of how the product was built. If something breaks, you can look back at the logs and see exactly what changed and when. Aang is doing exactly that, but for his existence. Notes on Gardening, part 790, isn't a chapter in a memoir, it's a commit message.
Found new plant, optimized placement, end of log.
And that explains the brevity. You notice the post itself was relatively short. It doesn't need to be a manifesto. It's just one data point in a massive data set.
If you look at the posts surrounding this one, you really see that rhythm. Just before this, part 789, he was dealing with leggy vinca.
Leggy usually means a plant is stretching for light, getting thin and weak. That's a bug.
And immediately after, or at least in the same time frame based on the sidebar, he's posting notes on Haskell programming, part 43, adding descriptions. And notes on fish keeping, part 182, light adjustments.
Look at the pattern there. Leggy vinca needs pruning. Fish keeping needs light adjustments. Haskell code needs descriptions added. It's all maintenance. It's all system administration.
So in the span of maybe 24 hours, this man has debugged his Haskell code, adjusted the parameters of his aquarium, pruned a failing plant, and integrated a new pearl-like creeper into his hanging pot infrastructure.
It's a synthesis of the digital and the organic. And notice the methodology is identical across all of them. Observe, document, adjust, repeat.
It completely demystifies the idea of expertise, doesn't it? Because I think a lot of our listeners might look at someone who has written 790 notes on gardening and think, well, he must be a master horticulturist.
But the tone isn't I'm the master. The tone is I'm exploring.
That's key. The title of the post is, Should We Explore the Trailing Pegaga? It's a question. Even at post number 790, he's asking questions. He's not lecturing.
And he's doing it publicly. That's another thing I noticed in the sidebar. There's a section called Do Support. And who does he list? The Electronic Frontier Foundation, the Free Software Foundation, the Tor Project, Wikipedia.
These are heavy hitters of the open internet.
They are. This aligns perfectly with the Free Libre and open source software, or FLOSS tag he uses. The philosophy of FLOSS is that code should be open for anyone to inspect, modify, and learn from. Knowledge shouldn't be locked in a black box. Aang is applying that philosophy to his gardening. He is open sourcing his learning process.
He's open sourcing his mistakes, too. That's the bravest part.
It is. When you post 84 times a month, you are definitely posting your failures. You're posting the plants that died, the fish tank parameters that went wrong, the code that didn't compile.
But that's where the value is. We live in a world of curated feeds. If he only posted the perfect, pearl-like shimmering leaves, it would just be another Instagram feed. Look at my perfect life.
Exactly.
But because he posts addressing leggy vinca,
Yeah.
it becomes a knowledge base.
It becomes a scientific journal. You know, we talk about the deep dive being a shortcut to being well-informed. Aang is showing us the long road to being well-informed. The long road is take notes constantly.
It makes me think about how we consume information versus how he creates it. We scroll, he commits,
And he iterates. That's the other engineering concept here. Iteration. You don't build version 1.0 perfectly. You build version 1.1, then 0.2. The Trailing Pegaga isn't the final answer to his garden. It's just the current iteration of the hanging pot module.
That's a great way of looking at it. So let's circle back to that module for a second. The Dichondra micrantha. He chose it for the hanging pots to optimize space. What does this tell us about his aesthetic sense?
Oh, absolutely. The engineer builds the structure, but the artist lives inside it. The way he describes the silvery-green sheen shows he's looking for texture. He's not just maximizing biomass, he's maximizing delight.
It's a balance. The engineer builds the hanging pots, the soil composition, the irrigation, but the artist chooses the plant that looks like a pearl.
And as we said, the two work together. The hanging pot, the engineering solution, is what enables the trailing habit, the aesthetic feature, to shine.
Before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more thing from the sidebar that I found just relatable. Among all this high-tech coding and botanical research, he has notes on dieting. Part 112. Discovering the parboiled rice.
Yes, parboiled rice.
It just grounds him so much. It reminds you that this operating system he's running also needs fuel.
It does, but look at the approach. He doesn't just eat rice, he has a note on discovering it. He treats his diet with the same curiosity as a new software library or a new plant species.
Is it compatible with my system?
Precisely. It's a unified theory of life. Everything is data. Everything is worth noting. Everything can be optimized.
It's inspiring, but I have to admit it's also slightly exhausting to think about.
It requires a certain type of energy, for sure. But I think the takeaway for the listener isn't necessarily, you must write 84 blog posts a month.
Please don't feel pressured to do that. I can barely manage one email a day.
Right. But the takeaway is the value of the feedback loop. Aang notices something, the pearl sheen. He acts on it, buys the plant. He documents it, writes the note. That loop locks the knowledge in. How many times have we walked through a garden center and thought, oh, that's pretty, and then forgot about it 5 minutes later?
Or bought it, killed it, and never figured out why.
Exactly. Aang won't forget why he bought this. He has the commit log. He knows exactly why he chose the Dichondra over the centella. And if it dies, he'll debug it in part 791.
Or maybe part 800 at the rate he's going.
Very likely.
So we've looked at the plant, the beautiful silvery-green Trailing Pegaga. We've looked at the placement, the vertical optimization in hanging pots to solve space complexity. And we've looked at the man, the software plumber, who treats his entire existence like an open-source project.
It's a powerful combination. It turns the mundane into the meaningful.
It really does. It challenges me to look at my own hobbies a little differently.
Yeah.
Not just as things I do, but as systems I manage.
And as stories you document.
Right. So as we close out this deep dive into qianmeng.org and the world of Aang, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought.
And this is the big one.
Aang has notes on gardening part 790. He has notes on fish keeping part 182. He is constantly pushing updates to the software of his life. He treats his personal growth like a series of release notes.
Bugs fixed, features added, performance improvements.
Exactly. So if you were to look at your own life right now, today, as a commit log, what version are you running? What bug are you trying to fix this week? And what feature, whether it's a new skill, a new habit, or just a new appreciation for a silvery green leaf, are you trying to optimize?
And you taking notes.
That's the question. Thanks for listening to the Deep Dives. We'll catch you on the next update.
Happy tinkering.